I remember the exact moment things started to shift. It was a Thursday evening and I had just wrapped up a client design pitch from my home office. I was feeling good, relieved even. I poured myself a drink and figured I'd check in with Molly, my wife. She was out at a company dinner, something she'd mentioned in passing that morning, like it wasn't a big deal. I dialed her cell. It rang once, then click. The call disconnected. Not declined exactly, but that kind of glitchy cutoff that leaves you staring at the screen, wondering if you imagined it. I waited a few minutes, trying to convince myself not to overthink it. Then a message buzzed in, too loud to talk. All good. I'll call later. It was vague. Weirdly vague. I should have let it go. But something about the way she said all good stuck with me. It was her favorite phrase when she wanted to brush something off. I'd heard it during arguments, during uncomfortable talks with my parents, always when she wanted distance. That night, for reasons I couldn't quite explain, I opened our old shared laptop. She hardly used it anymore, but it was still logged into her cloud messages. We used to sync devices so she could send texts while working on spreadsheets, back when we trusted each other enough not to worry about that kind of thing. I wasn't snooping, at least that's what I told myself. I was looking for reassurance. Instead, I found Chris. The name didn't register at first. But the messages? They punched me in the gut. Dozens of them, some going back weeks. Nothing overtly *Zool, she was smarter than that. But the tone, the inside jokes, the late-night timestamps, the way she wrote, "You always understand me and you make work bearable," they were in * mate. Two in * mate for someone she'd never mentioned. When she came home later, I asked her calmly, "I thought about Chris." She blinked, caught off guard. Then smiled. "Oh God, Jake, really? He's just a coworker. We joke around. You're reading into it." I showed her the messages. She read a few, her expression tight. Then she laughed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "This is work banter. We all text like that. You think I'd actually?" She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't accuse her. I just nodded, said I understood, and let it drop. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something inside me had shifted. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't know who I was looking at across the dinner table. After that night, something clicked, or maybe something cracked. It was like I'd been walking through our life half asleep and suddenly someone shook me awake. All at once, the past year started to rearrange itself in my mind. The missing pieces didn't just fall into place, they smacked me in the face. The first thing that stood out was the dinners. God, the dinners. What used to be an occasional thing, maybe once every couple of months, had quietly ramped up into a regular occurrence. Networking events, she'd say, or late meetings, or client mixers. There was always a reason, always something just vague enough to make questioning it seem petty. Molly was good at that, sanding down her stories just enough to avoid friction. And I let her. I started counting. In the past 3 months alone, she'd been out 16 times for work. 16. And yet, when I'd ask how things were going, who she was meeting, or how the clients responded, she'd brush it off. Nothing major, she'd say, or just the usual crowd. If I pressed further, she'd change the subject or suddenly remember a text she had to send. That used to feel like modern marriage. Now it felt like deliberate avoidance. Then there was the perfume. She used to wear a scent I loved, warm, subtle, a little earthy. It reminded me of the hikes we used to take upstate before life got complicated. But a few months ago, she switched to something sharper, more floral, something that didn't feel like her. When I asked about it, she said a coworker had given it to her as part of a company gift bag. "It's not really me, is it?" She had laughed, but she kept wearing it. Not every day, just on the nights she went out. I should have paid more attention. Another memory surfaced, a weekend in Asheville. We'd driven down last fall, supposedly for a couple's getaway, but the entire trip felt fragmented. I'd wanted to hike and try breweries. She kept checking her phone and insisted we split up for the afternoon so she could catch up on emails. She spent 2 hours at a cafe near the hotel while I wandered through antique stores alone. When I got back, she looked guilty. Said she was just tired. But there was a half smile on her face I didn't recognize then. I do now. Back then, I told myself not to be insecure. I chalked it all up to work stress or maybe just a phase in our marriage. Everyone drifts sometimes, right? People hit rough patches. That's what I believed, what I needed to believe. Because the alternative? That required tearing up everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. Even her sleep patterns had changed. She used to fall asleep in my arms, easy, relaxed. But sometime around last spring, she started turning in later and later. Said she needed alone time to unwind. I'd find her curled up on the couch with her laptop, headphones in, zoning out to shows I didn't recognize. Now, I wondered if it was really Netflix. Or if it was messages. Him. One night, I caught a glimpse of her screen before she minimized it. Just a flicker, too fast to read, but the look on her face when she saw me watching, that told me more than any text ever could. It was the look people give when they're hiding something. Not scared. Just exposed. And then there was that Sunday lunch. It was back in February. We were at her parents' house. Her mom was telling a story about Molly as a teenager, and I saw Molly check her phone and smile, this tiny, private grin that had nothing to do with the conversation. When I leaned over and asked what was funny, she blinked and said, "Oh, nothing. Just a meme from work." At the time, I believed her. Now I wondered if Chris had texted her right then, and I just watched her fall deeper into someone else's orbit 6 inches from my shoulder. Looking back, I felt like a detective in a story I never asked to be part of. Like I was holding a magnifying glass to moments that once seemed mundane and seeing every crack, every secret thread running beneath the surface. It wasn't paranoia. It was recognition. I wasn't inventing signs, I was finally reading them. I thought about the way she'd changed physically, too. She joined a new gym in March, started getting up early, jogging before work, eating clean, drinking protein shakes. I was proud of her at first. I even tried to join her once or twice. But she said she liked having that space for herself. I respected that. Gave her room. That's what you do when you trust someone. You give them room. And now all I could think about was how much of that room she'd used to build something I wasn't part of. I remember once, years ago, when we were just dating, Molly told me her biggest fear was being invisible. Not alone, she said. Invisible. Like someone's with you, but they don't see you anymore. I promised her I'd never let that happen. And I meant it. I still do. But lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, in some backwards way, I'd become the invisible one. There was one last thing that came back to me, something small, almost stupid. A restaurant receipt. I'd found it in her coat pocket one morning when I grabbed it on my way out the door. It was for a dinner at a bistro downtown, the kind of place we used to go on anniversaries. The date was a Tuesday night, and she'd told me she was working late on a budget presentation. I'd shrugged and tossed the receipt back into the pocket, figuring she must have grabbed food with a colleague. I didn't even notice the second entree listed. Now, that receipt felt like a confession I had ignored. I didn't confront her, not yet. I wasn't ready for that. There was a part of me still hoping I was wrong, that the texts and smiles and receipts added up to something innocent. But that part of me was shrinking fast. So instead, I watched. I listened. I waited. And every time she laughed at a message, every time she said, "It's just work," I nodded. But inside, I was building a map. And all the roads were starting to point in one direction. It was 2 weeks later when the last piece fell into place, quiet, almost casual. The way it happened didn't match the gravity of what it meant. But that's how real betrayals often show up, not with a bang, but with a shrug. I was in my workshop, sanding down a pine cabinet for a client, lost in the rhythm of it. Working with what had always been therapy for me, predictable, honest. When you cut a corner too sharp or let moisture in too early, the material tells you. No guessing games. No smiles that meant something else. No pretending. That's when Kyle showed up. He wasn't a close friend, more of an acquaintance I'd met through a few mutual friends and a charity build project. Friendly guy. He was dropping off some old tools he figured I could repurpose. We talked for a few minutes, just small talk. He mentioned he'd seen Molly recently, said it offhandedly like it was nothing. And for a second, I wasn't even listening closely. Yeah, ran into her and some guy in Newport the other week. Looked like they were staying at the Breakwater. She said she was in town for a training weekend or something. I froze mid-sand, my hand tightening around the block. The Breakwater? I repeated, careful to keep my tone neutral. Yeah. That boutique hotel on the strip by the marina, he said, nodding like it was no big deal. Honestly, I wouldn't have recognized her if she hadn't called out to me. Looked like they were heading in together, holding hands and everything. I figured you were doing some sort of couples thing until she introduced the guy as her coworker. My ears were ringing. Molly had told me she'd be out of town that weekend for a leadership workshop, some regional thing her company was pushing. I even remembered her showing me the agenda on her phone. Slides and schedules. Maybe it was real. Maybe they really did have a training event booked in Newport. But now? Now I knew what it really was. Did she say his name? I asked. Kyle paused. I think it was Chris? Tall guy, dark jacket. He didn't really say much. Honestly, I didn't think twice about it. You good, man? I lied. Yeah. Just didn't realize she'd be down there. She must have forgotten to mention it. He nodded and went on talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. In my head, I was already replaying that weekend. Friday morning, she kissed me on the cheek, said she'd text when she arrived. Then radio silence until later that evening when she messaged, "All good. Long day. Going to crash early. Hope your project's going well. Miss you." I remembered reading that and feeling relieved. Telling myself not to be one of those guys, the suspicious husbands who micromanage every trip and scroll through their wife's texts when she's asleep. I had trusted her. God, I had trusted her. And now here I was, standing in the middle of my own shop, sawdust in the air, with a memory I could no longer look at the same way. After Kyle left, I didn't go back to sanding. I sat down on the workbench and just stared at the floor. My hands were still for once. The usual noise in my head gone. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was something colder. Finality. I didn't confront Molly that night. There was no point. The denial would come wrapped in laughter. She'd say Kyle misread the situation. She'd throw out something like, "You're not seriously listening to secondhand gossip, are you?" And maybe if I hadn't seen the texts, hadn't already questioned the perfume and the secret smiles, I might have believed her. But I wasn't that version of myself anymore. So I didn't ask. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't accuse. I just went quiet. Not in a spiteful way, just in that way people get when they've seen enough. I stopped asking about her day. Stopped trying to be the one to bridge the gap. Let her drift. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and chose not to mention it. Either way, I started making plans. Not out of revenge. I wasn't interested in payback. I didn't need to expose her to friends or blast the truth online. What I needed was distance. I needed a path that wasn't tied to hers anymore. So I called my lawyer. We'd worked together years ago when I first purchased the coastal property. He was thorough, direct, and didn't waste time on small talk. I told him everything, the texts, the trip, the conversations that no longer made sense. He didn't ask if I had proof. He just asked what I wanted. Fairness, I said. And enough room to rebuild. From there, it was all motion, paperwork, asset evaluation, quiet meetings on Tuesday mornings. Molly never saw it coming. She was busy, distracted. She thought things had just hit a lull. I heard her tell a friend over the phone that Jake's been weird lately, but I think it's just work stress. Work stress? Sure. Eventually, I sat her down and told her. Told her I'd filed. Told her I wasn't angry, I was done. She didn't argue, not much. At first, she laughed like it was some kind of elaborate bluff. Then she cried. Then she got defensive. "You're ending our marriage over some text messages?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm ending it because you made a choice. You just didn't tell me you made it." She asked if it was about Chris. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because here's the truth no one likes to say out loud, sometimes you don't need a dramatic betrayal. You don't need to catch someone in bed with another person. Sometimes you just need one clear moment, one honest detail from a third party to rip off the blindfold. That moment for me was a hotel name in a casual sentence. The rest? That was just gravity doing its job. Dividing the property was never going to be simple. The coastal house wasn't just where we lived, it was where I'd invested everything. Blood, sweat, weekends, my sanity. I'd built the damn place with my own hands, one plank at a time. Back when it was just a dream Molly and I used to sketch on napkins. And now I was expected to treat it like some line item on a spreadsheet. Legally, she had partial rights. There was no getting around that. My lawyer tried to fight it, but the state doesn't care who holds the hammer, it cares what's on the deed. Molly hadn't laid a single brick, but her name was there, etched in official ink. She didn't fight for much else. Didn't want the main house, didn't argue over the savings or the truck. But when it came to the coastal property, she hesitated. Said she might want to use it on weekends. Claimed it was sentimental. That it held memories. I almost laughed at that, memories she'd already rewritten with someone else. Still, I didn't argue. Not openly. I nodded, signed what I needed to, and let her believe she was walking away with the upper hand. Because by then I had other plans. The truth is, long before the lawyers and courtrooms, I had started dreaming again. Not about marriage or revenge or salvaging the past, but about purpose. About taking what was broken and making something whole out of it. The house was no longer just a house. It was potential. It started with clearing the back acre, overgrown scrub, dead trees, rusted fencing. I rented a skid steer, spent whole days under the sun, sweating through shirts, and going to bed with sore hands and a stubborn kind of satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. I laid out markers, poured foundation, and framed up a long barn-style workspace. Friends started asking questions. "What are you building out there?" And I'd answer with half-smiles. "We'll see." By midsummer, it had a name, Coastal Forge. The vision was simple but stubborn, a working hub where people could come learn the trades that too many had forgotten. Not just woodworking, but restoration, trailers, vintage campers, old tools, furniture that still had stories to tell. A place where handcraft and sweat equity still meant something. I launched a small website. Just a logo and a contact form. I posted a few photos of the early work, frames going up, the grain of sanded hardwood, welding sparks in the twilight. I didn't expect much. But people came. At first, it was 2 kids from a trade school looking for summer credit. Then a retiree who used to restore Airstreams in the 80s. A local teacher burned out from the classroom who said she just wanted to build something that wouldn't delete itself when the power went out. I didn't advertise. Word spread on its own. Molly didn't know. She still thought of the property as a quiet beach escape, something she could reclaim whenever it suited her. A symbol of what she once had and could maybe still dip into like an old song on a playlist. But Coastal Forge was changing everything. Slowly, relentlessly, and legally. I filed the permits. Applied for local business status. Got a small grant from the Regional Craft Council. And most importantly, I made sure every square foot of new construction was outside the footprint of the existing home. Separate. By the time the first cohort arrived in late August, we had 2 open-air workstations, a converted shipping container studio, and the beginnings of a classroom with salvaged wood floors and oversized windows that looked out to the bay. I kept the old flagstone path Molly had insisted on years ago, but now it led somewhere new. The change was almost spiritual. There's something about teaching someone to plane a board or weld a frame for the first time that reconnects you to the reason you ever picked up a tool. It wasn't about control. It wasn't even about creation. It was about clarity. You either cut the line right or you didn't. There's no bluffing with wood or steel. It either fits or it fails. I found that oddly comforting. And little by little, the bitterness began to wear off. Not disappear. Just shift. Some nights I'd walk the property alone, hear the wind skimming off the ocean, feel that familiar ache in my chest. The one that used to mean loss. But now it was something quieter. Like breathing into a bruise. It still hurt, but it didn't control me anymore. Molly reached out once during that time. Just a text, can we talk about the weekends? I'd like to make sure we both get time there. I didn't reply right away. I let the message sit in my inbox like an unopened letter from a stranger. Eventually, I wrote back. Happy to coordinate. Just know the property's an active training site now. We've got scheduled workshops most weekends. I'll send you the calendar. She didn't respond. Not then. And I didn't follow up. Because by that point, it wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about proving anything or showing what I'd become without her. It wasn't even about healing. It was about building something that couldn't be taken away, not this time. Not because it was hidden or private or protected by paper, but because it was bigger than one person's betrayal. It was built on intention. By the time fall came around, we had our first full waiting list. People from 4 different states were signed up for a 6-week restoration course. I partnered with a local college to offer continuing ed credit. A retired mechanic from Maine brought down a vintage teardrop trailer and offered to run a 2-day hands-on seminar. We converted the old shed into a parts library. Installed solar panels. A student started designing merch without me asking. Somewhere in all that momentum, I realized I hadn't checked Molly's Instagram or Facebook in over a month. I didn't care what Chris looked like, or whether they were happy, or if their hands still fit together like mine and hers used to. That version of my life, the one defined by her smile, her silences, her half-truths, it was over. And not in a cinematic, dramatic way. Just over. I was already living the next chapter. Building it piece by piece from the wreckage. Not perfectly. Not quickly. But with purpose. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the one who'd been left behind. She showed up without warning. A gray Saturday in mid-October, air crisp with salt and sawdust, the kind of morning where everything feels raw and real. I was in the middle of walking a small group through the basics of trailer frame repair when I saw the SUV pull up. I didn't recognize it at first, new lease, probably. But the second the door opened, I knew. Molly stepped out wearing jeans that were too clean for a workshop and boots with soles that had never touched a gravel path. Behind her came a man I hadn't seen in person until that moment, taller than I expected, sharp jawline, navy pea coat. Chris. I stood still, hands on my hips, watching from across the yard as they took in the scene. Piles of salvaged lumber, half-built dormers, tools laid out in trays, smoke rising from a burned barrel someone had lit for warmth. And voices, students laughing, asking questions, hammering. Activity. Momentum. They walked forward together, a little stiff. I could tell Chris didn't want to be there. His eyes darted between the trailers, the tools, the people, like he was trying to decode it all and couldn't find the legend. Molly gave a thin smile. Hey, Jake. I nodded. Didn't expect visitors today. Figured it was a good weekend to come by. The calendar said no sessions were scheduled. There's always something going on, I said, not unkindly. She hesitated. I thought we'd have some quiet time here, that's all. Before I could answer, another voice jumped in. Jake, you got a minute? It was Harper, one of the workshop students, high school junior, sharp as hell, with a knack for electrical systems. She slowed as she spotted Molly and Chris. Oh, sorry. It's fine, I said. This is Molly. She's part of the original design team. Molly's expression twitched. Harper gave a polite nod. Nice to meet you. I'll catch you later, Jake. As Harper walked off, someone else caught my eye, Jessica. Chris's daughter. I'd seen her hanging around before, more curious than committed. That day, though, she was already elbow-deep in a stripped-down trailer, chatting with Harper and another student while helping diagram the wiring. Molly followed my gaze. Is that Jessica? Chris's jaw tightened. She's here. I nodded. Started dropping by a couple weeks ago. Thought she was just tagging along, but she asked good questions. Started showing up early. Sticking around late. She never mentioned this, Chris said. She's 17, Molly said, almost reflexively. Probably just a phase. I kept my voice even. Maybe. Or maybe she's just looking for something that feels real. Molly bristled. We didn't come here to argue. I stepped back slightly. Then what did you come for? She glanced at Chris, who suddenly seemed very interested in the dirt beneath his shoes. Molly turned back to me. I wasn't expecting all this. Not expecting what? This, she said, motioning around. This whole operation. When we agreed on shared use, I thought it'd still feel like a home. Like it used to. I smiled, tired but not bitter. It doesn't feel like that anymore. I can see that, she said softly. Chris finally spoke. Can we walk through the house? You can, I said. It's mostly storage now. No plumbing in the upstairs bath. New wings under inspection, so don't go past the blue tape. He nodded and walked toward the porch. Molly stayed behind. You really built all this? With help. It's a lot, she said. I didn't expect it to be so busy. Or loud. It's not a retreat, Molly. It's a forge. She exhaled slowly. I thought I could still have a piece of it. That maybe there'd be weekends where it could be ours again. But this, she shook her head. This isn't that. No, I said, not unkindly. It's something else. That's when Jessica spotted us. She jogged over, wiping her hands on a rag. Hi, she said to Molly, then turned to me. Can I stay for the afternoon? Harper said we're running a layout check and I wanted to try sketching one myself. Of course, I said. Check in with Lisa first. She nodded and ran back toward the workshop. Molly stared after her. She's never this interested in anything. She's good, I said. Has a real eye for proportion. Chris came back a minute later. Place has changed. Yeah, I said. It's alive now. Jessica returned, now with gloves and a clipboard. I'll be over by station 2, she told Chris without looking at Molly. Then she disappeared into the activity. Chris looked down at his watch. We should probably go. Molly lingered. You'll let us know if there's a weekend we can actually use the house? I already did. Sent the calendar twice. She bit her lip. Right? We didn't say goodbye. They just left. Jessica stayed. And from that weekend on, she didn't just visit, she committed. Molly tried to regain control, filing a formal request to pause all construction on her designated weekends. But Coastal Forge had permits, student schedules, and support from the local development council. I declined. Firmly. That's when she shifted tactics, implying I was manipulating Jessica, accusing me of turning her against her own father. But Jessica wasn't anyone's pawn. She returned on her own, eager to learn. Over time, she became more than just a curious guest, she became essential. Helping organize materials, guiding new students. Molly showed up once more, livid, but the noise of progress drowned her out. The more she pushed, the more obvious it became she wasn't part of this world anymore. Not in the way she once was. And that scared her more than anything. By fall, Coastal Forge was thriving. 3 workshops in motion, 2 dorms open, and an exhibition drawing weekend visitors. Jessica stepped up as a teaching assistant, confident, focused, steady. When Molly came back with an offer to buy out the property, I didn't even consider it. I didn't need to. This land no longer represented pain or loss. It had become legacy. The house where betrayal was once uncovered now stood as proof of what could be built from it. I looked at Molly and saw no threat, no longing. Just distance. That first call she'd cut short, it hadn't ended anything. It had begged *and something entirely new. And I'd built it not to get even, but to move forward. Stronger. Clearer. Free.